Hello and welcome to My Own Worst Enemy. We are going to start a playthrough of War for America, the American Revolution 1775 through 1782. This is a game by Gilbert Collins. This came out, gosh, I think it's been about 3 years now, and I really wanted to play when it first came out. And when it first released, there were a lot of opinions about the first edition of the rule set. There were a lot of people that had problems interpreting those rules. So I decided just to put it aside and see how that would all shake out. And of course, time passes by more quickly than we think it does. And here we are now approaching the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. So I thought, well, now's probably a good time to get back into this. So the rules have been updated, and this is what I'm using now. So this is version, and I think this is the newest version, 3.0. I don't know if there's a 2.0. I couldn't find one. This is 3.0. So this is the latest. Now, to address that initial controversy that occurred with the release of the game, I did read through a lot of the comments on the Board Game Geek forums, and I've read this rule book now. And so what I'm going to say, I'm not going to go into any great detail on this. It's kind of disappointing, and I hate to see it happen to Gilbert Collins, a game designer who I happen to like. But I will say that even now, and I've read through these rules multiple times, you have to learn this game. This is a rule book that this is a game rather that has a lot of moving parts. I think Gilbert even says this in one of his videos. There's a lot of moving parts in this game. That in itself is not a problem. The problem starts coming into the fact that with all those moving parts, this is what I call a shotgun rule book, and I've used that term in the past before. All those moving parts, if you do something, the implications are scattered throughout here as to what may happen. Like if the British land in a region or a colony, that may set off a chain of events where you got to check for continentals coming on, just all kinds of other things going on. This rule book, it could have been, and this is the third, like I said, version 3.0. It still needs work. There's a lot of ideas in here that are just too nebulous. You'll read something and it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to you as you read it. And I think the problem, and I'm just going to try to explain Gilbert Collins' mind here a little bit, and I shouldn't do that because I don't know his mind, but from what I can tell, he is a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to the American Revolution history. So, and the other problem is, and this is a problem, because I don't think it was followed up correctly. The rules were written by Gilbert Collins, who designed this game. I think as a designer, you've got to get somebody else to, if nothing else, take your initial draft, find somebody who hasn't played the game and have them play it and write down questions that come up as they play. Gilbert knows the American Revolution, and in here and how the game plays, that comes through to me that I think there's things that he wrote about, or there's expectations about occurrences in the game that are based upon his extensive knowledge of the American Revolution. This is a war game. This is a board game. So he's not trying to get you to follow that history, but he is kind of introducing, I guess, his take on the American Revolution in his game. And there are designer notes in here that kind of explain his train of thought. But the issue, I think, is, from what I can tell and what I've read, it just seems like Gilbert wrote this. He knows what he's talking about as far as the rules go, because this is his game. He designed it. He played it. So when he writes something down in here, he knows the answer, but I don't think he took a step back and thought, let me think, if a new player comes in and he reads this line, what is he going to think? And I could point out many examples in here of what I'm talking about. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to focus on this too much. I believe there's a great game in here. You're going to have to struggle with these rules a little bit to get to it, though. There's nice player's aid cards. There's still errors on this, clarifications that need to be made on this. So once you get past all that, there's a great game in here. It may not be your expectation of how the War for America took place. I mean, it's not going to be historic, but I think there is a fun strategic game here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through this, and it'll be slow going because I'm going to have to refer to this book. And I recommend, if you do play this game, get you one of these notebooks, print this, put the holes in it, put the little paper protectors on it, because you're going to be flipping through this quite a bit. to find information. It's not a long rule book. That's the sad thing. This rule book I think could have been great, and I wish it would have been much better written than it is. This is the game's weakness. This rule book. The other stuff, like the leaders kind of they come in according to your reinforcement chart, so you don't have a whole lot of choice now. This is kind of like U.S. Civil War, where leaders are going to come and go and get promoted outside of your control. And some people don't like that. I kind of don't like that, but I can live with it. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the game, and then we'll play a turn or two or three. And one of the first things you're going to know about my setup is this game board. This is a mounted board that I had made up on, I think it's boardgamemakers.com. Why did I do that? Well, this game comes with two map sheets, two full-size map sheets to show you this map. A lot of people love that. In the unboxing, I said I didn't really like that. I wanted everything on one smaller map board, and mainly for me, it's because I do these playthroughs. And when I have a game on the table, an ideal size is what the normal map sizes are, the 34 by 22, I think it is. And that's what this is. So, and you can see there's still a little bit of information cut off at the top and the bottom. And when we look at these areas up here, I'll zoom in closer, so it's not an issue. But I can now see most of the game board with this one camera. So we can see mostly what's happening. All the action is going to take place up in here anyway. Really, most of the action will take place up in here in the Caribbean. And I can always grab the board and slide it up if need be. But I do have another camera. We'll zoom in. So I wanted this smaller map. It works out great. If you're thinking about doing this, it actually works out really great. There's enough space to put all the pieces on the board and not worry about overcrowding. So how do you win War for America? Well, the rule book tells you that there's two things you're looking for. You have prior to French entry and then post-French entry. So the British, prior to the French coming into the game, will have to reduce the colonial political will to 0 after any colonial action pulse. And then in 1775, control all the colonies in New England while not losing both Montreal and Quebec up here. Good luck. That's going to be hard to do, not impossible, but it will be hard to do. However, when the French come in, it's going to be even more difficult for the British to win. Colonial player prior to French entry is to reduce the British political willpower down to 0 after any British action pulse, or cause the surrender of a second British army or force of at least 5 strength points of regulars at the end of any combat. That's also going to be hard to do. So basically, you're going to have to destroy 2 large armies, and that will trigger a victory for the colonials. And after the French come in, you're going to have to accomplish one of these things. Again, get the political marker to 0. That's always one of the victory conditions. Capture all of the French ports in the Caribbean while not losing any of their own. So, and let me slide this back up again so we can see down here. So that's another part. This is one part of the American Revolution that Gilbert thinks was very important to the war. And it was important. I'm not sure I would put as much emphasis on this as he does, but it was important. So to have this included in the game, that's really cool. I'm going to slide this back down again. And where were we? So control 4 colonies at the end of the game. Control the following port spaces of 13 colonies at the end of the game, while still controlling Halifax, New York City, and Norfolk. So it tells you which of those ports to control. Therefore, the colonials after French entry, have the British avoid those, of course. And then British are unable to move 12 strength points of regulars to the Caribbean for withdrawal. Capture both Halifax and Quebec at the end of a British action pulse. That's going to be hard to do. Capture all the British ports in the Caribbean while not losing any French ports. Capture both Montreal and Quebec while preventing British control of New England and the Middle States at the end of the game. Capture all the British possessions in 13 colonies, and at the end of any British action point. Another error that needs to be corrected. Prevent the British from controlling any of the 13 colonies while not losing any of the French possessions in the Caribbean at the end of the games. Again, showing you how important that Gilbert thinks the Caribbean was to the American Revolution. So that's victory. Now set up. I've got the board set up, and there are setup charts. So let's see if I can find those. I thought there were setup charts. Maybe they're on the back of the terrain effects chart. It is. Okay, so this card tells you how to start the positions, the British and the colonial positions on the board. Not a whole lot out there in 1775. There's a special rule down here, too, to be aware of. It just says that Boston must be garrisoned by at least 4 strength points at all times. So I've put all of the colonial and the British forces on the map, and as we play, we will zoom into those and see what's going on. That is how we set up the board. And then there's a terrain effects chart, which we will refer to here as we play. We have the sequence of play card, which will tell us just that, what steps we take in each turn. And I'll go through this in more detail as we actually go through the turns. Then on the other side of that, we have some charts that we're going to have to refer to. We have our reinforcement charts, our reinforcement cards. You get one for the British, you get one for the Colonials. And while I'm looking at this, I will point out that the game did ship with a clarification sheet. So this will make sure you look at this and I think a lot of these have been corrected. A lot of the rules have been corrected in the 3.0 rewrite, but the charts and tables and these reinforcement things, the terrain effects charts, make sure you refer to this to make sure you're getting this right, because there were some changes in the reinforcements and these other charts. Nothing on the other side of those. There is also a foreign entry card. And this is another change, I think, that's in those clarifications. The French will come in. They're going to come in one way or the other. So it's not going to take any major victory or anything to get the French to enter. They're just going to come in. I believe I read that the Spanish and the Dutch come in through card play. And I think that's a change to here where it says deploy the forces in certain years. So I think that's going to be card play. And finally, this is the Continental Levy table that's actually on the chart that I showed you. Gilbert posted, I think it was on Board Game Geek, maybe it was Comsim World, I can't remember, but he posted what he thought should be a change to the, is it in here? A change to the, yeah, here we go. A change to this table. And he seemed to think that these numbers were a little bit too high, so he just adjusted them down a little bit. I will be using that. I think if he adjusted it down a little bit, he did it for good reason. So we'll use his Continental Levy table instead of what's on this chart to play the game. Okay, so we are starting the game. The year is 1775. We are in the spring of 1775. And so I'm going to zoom in to the part you can't see here so we can look at the political will and the action pulse markers up there to show you how they're set up. So let's go ahead and zoom in up there. Okay, so the political will starts for the British at 2. Political will for the Colonials will start at 13. The British want this to get down to 0. Of course, the Colonials are like that to get down to 0. As we saw in the victory conditions. Your action pulses are here. So there are 2 of these action pulse chits. And in the first turn, 1775, the spring, you're going to have 2 action pulses. Thereafter, you're going to roll for initiative, and you can have 4 action pulses. And this is where we're going to track our initiative. So you're going to roll for initiative. Whoever wins the initiative will place in this box. I don't know if it says, yeah, first. Second. And then for this first turn in 1775, the British start with the initiative. So they will get to move first. And as you can see down here, it is the spring of 1775. So let's go ahead and zoom back out and take a look at the strategic map again. So our forces are set up. The last thing we need to do for setup is there's a deck of cards that I have already shuffled, and we'll just shuffle these again real quick just to show you that I shuffled them. I'm not looking at what's in here, and I don't really care what's in here because that would ruin the whole fun of the game. So we're going to draw 3 cards. You can have 3 cards in your hand at any given time. So let's go ahead and do that now. The Colonials will be up here. The British, of course, are down here. Now, these are the army cards. There are 3 armies you can have per side. We'll talk about those as we get to them. So I'm just going to put their cards under those army track charts. And it worked out interesting here. So when you're drawing these cards, if you're the Colonials, and let's say you drew this Simcoe card, and you had this in your hand, you were required to offer that to the British because it is not one of your cards. So if they had this, they would say, hey, British player, do you want this card? Now, the British player could either take this into his hand and decide which of the 4 cards now he wants to discard if he wants to keep that. So you have to watch out for that. It just worked out this way that the Colonials got 2 of their cards, and the British actually got one of their cards meant for them. So there's no exchange that needs to happen here. The rest of the cards I'm just going to put down here on the board, and we will pull from that deck as we go along. Another word of caution is to always be aware of what is in your hand. It could impact the board. Don't forget about these cards, and you're going to have to figure out when is the best time to play them. One of the neat things about this game is the strategy of when to play a card or when to maybe hold out playing it. Also note that on these cards, these particular cards, some of these cards have a red R with a circle. That means that once you play this card, it is out of the game. You will not put it in the discard pile, but you'll put it back in the box. It is done. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in and we will learn this together. Like I said, there's a lot of rules and a lot of moving parts. I'm sure I'll make mistakes. If you go back and watch Gilbert's videos, he made mistakes. So if I make a mistake, please let me know in the comments below what the mistake was. And preferably, if you can, put what rule I violated. You know, the 11.2 or 6.1, just put that in the comments to let me know. I'll try to correct mistakes that I make if I can. Probably can't though, because once the game plays along, it's hard to go back and change things. So I'm going to use the sequence of play. We will start with the reinforcements and for the British because they have the initiative. And it says both players place their reinforcements after consulting their reinforcement chart. Well, in this case, it's the British. So we'll grab their reinforcement card. And we look, so 1775, and in special note, all reinforcements for the British, unless noted in these appearance charts, will appear in the British European box. That's up here in the corner. And well, you can't see that, but it's from Europe. It's a small box, and they just place them in there, and they will come down these transit paths to wherever you would like them to go. So for 1775, we're in the spring. We get 2 British regulars. Now is a good time to look at a counter. Here's a British regular. That's 2 strength points of a British regular. So he's going to come out. I'll put him up here in the Europe box. And then we're also going to get Howe, Clinton, and Burgoyne. These are all 2-star ranks. So let's grab those. They're over here. I will show you those. There they are. So that's Clinton, Burgoyne, and Howe. And the 5 is their initiative value, and the letters below that, the quality of the leader, that will determine how many strength points they can command, and it will also modify some of the combat results. So these will also all go into that European box at the upper right-hand corner of this map, at least my modified map. So it depends on how you lay yours out on the table. I'm going to put those up there. Now it also says, take note, that their destination is Boston. So when you move a force, and this includes land forces, you always have to announce your intended destination before you roll for initiative. So in this case, we're being told these are going to Boston. What I'm going to do for land forces, I'm going to use these little move counters to show the intended destinations of colonial and British forces. For the naval forces, I'll use this little triangle just to distinguish that this is the destination of a fleet and not a land force. So these are heading for Boston, and Boston is here. Now Boston already has a fleet. It's got Graves, Gage is there, and there are 4 regular and 1 loyalist unit there. They're also entrenched. Their destination is going to be Boston. Outside of Boston, in what is that? Worcester. There's a magazine, and there are 6 colonials out there. Let's pause for a minute to look at these militia. These green units, says right there militia, that's their strength point 6. There is a small black dot in the lower right-hand corner. So these militia are special. They start on the board, the game on the board. So what will happen is if they survive the initial turn or 2, I think it is, they'll get converted into continental, so they'll be upgraded. There are some militia rules for normal militia that don't have those black dots that get applied during the game. Those rules will not apply to any militia that has that black dot this first turn. And like I said, once they get upgraded to continentals, it won't be a concern anyway because they'll all be gone. But just take note, that's why there's a black dot there. So sequence of play, we have placed our reinforcements for the British. And the British can transfer any leaders from and to friendly spaces within North America. Basically, so this is where, for the colonials too, this is where you move your leaders around on the board. We're not there yet. Up here, there's colonial leaders and there are British leaders that you can pull from or change on the board. And so it's just saying to do that now. We're not going to do it because it's too early. And then it says the leaders for both sides are promoted, removed, and so forth. Again, it tells you when to do that. That's out of your control. So let's continue along with our sequence of play. Now, this won't apply early spring turns because we are in the 1775 year, and we only had a spring. So early spring, late spring, those will occur in the regular turn sequence. Well, I think I said that the Colonials would put in their replacements during their turn, but it actually all happens here in the reinforcement phase. So they would place in if they had any. They don't. Where'd the reinforcement card go? Double check that they don't. Again, we're in early, so early summer is the earliest they're going to get reinforcement. And again, we won't do these two. This is early spring turns only, winter turns only. And this is when we will do things with the cards and winter events will happen. So the next thing then would be the initiative phase. So we're going to roll for initiative. Well, normally we would roll for the initiative, but like I said, the British have the initiative. No need to roll for it. And what you do, though, is both players would roll 1d6. Now, here's another thing that drives me nuts, is you refers to a d6 as a capital D6, which isn't so annoying. Normally it's written as a lowercase d6, and I've got a strong RPG background. But where it becomes a problem is he refers to rolling 2d6 as a capital D12, which that just drives me nuts. But you roll a d6, and the player with the higher result wins the initiative and performs the first action pulse. So again, the British have the action pulse here to start with. So you enter the action cycle. So the player performs the first action pulse by moving and having combat with one single force from one single space. 3 actions are performed during this turn, and we'll go through these as we encounter them in any order of choosing. And actually, we'll take a look at 9.10 in just a second here. When all actions have been completed, then the other player will go, and then you're going to go into a new action pulse. We'll re-roll for initiative again. And so let's take a quick look at 9.0. And 9.0 just does that. It lists your actions that can be performed for free, things like moving your units from the Europe box. And you just read through this before you actually play the game. There are important concepts in here. Retreating before combat is an important one. So keep that in mind. Like I said, lots of moving parts. Just you have to remember to keep checking for those. So the British start, and Gilbert recommends, and I agree with him, that you probably want to deploy your reinforcements first. So from that Europe box, we have the 3 leaders that are coming in and 2 British regulars. And what you do is you're going to roll a d6, and that will tell you how far they can move. So you follow along these blue lines to your destination. Remember, you have to declare your destination first. Already been declared for us as Boston for this first turn. So we're going to roll a d6 to see if they make it to Boston. So let's grab a dice tower. And so the game comes with a black and white d6, which is shameful in my opinion. So we're going to use blue and red. Red for the British. So let's roll to see how far those reinforcements make it. 2. Okay, so that's a low number, but I think that's enough. So they're going to come out of the European box. They're going to follow along this first line to the North England blockade. That's 1. And then 2 will land them in Boston, so they make it. So let's grab those forces. And now we have a stack forming in Boston. Let's go ahead and get rid of that naval marker unit there. So we got the entrenchment. We've got a loyalist, and there's already 4 British regulars in there with Gage. So now I'll show you this. So we've got that the 2 just arrived. We've got a 4. So I'm going to make change here. We're going to find a 6 strength point counter and put those on the board. All right, so I found a 6 strength point counter. So we've got and that just keeps the stack size down mainly. So we got the entrenchments. We'll put the loyalists next. 6 strength points and engage. In addition, 3 more leaders are coming in. We'll just put them all on top. I'm going to put Gage on top since I think he's the strongest leader. These are all 2 stars. Gage is let's see if you can see that. So the stars also will come into play here. 3 stars, showing seniority. So I'm going to put him back on top. So Gage is sitting in there with a sizable force. He's starting to form a sizable force. You can form armies in this game, and we'll talk about that once we get to that stage. You need 5 strength points to do so, and there's some other conditions. But that's something else to keep in mind. So now, once your units have made a landing, in this case, they landed at Boston, you still have 1 movement point. So we can move units now from Boston to another location here in the colonies. Basically, before I put all those in there, I probably should have done that without deciding what I wanted to do. So those 3 leaders, those 2 strength points, they just landed. They have 1 movement point left. So I could actually move those if I wanted to. But do I want to is the question. And I'm gonna say no for now. They're just gonna stay there in Boston. So that was a free action. So they still can take their one action pulse action. So you've got a unit down here with 2 loyalists. That is Dunmore sitting down in Virginia, it looks like. And these militia are sitting on a magazine in Richmond. So magazines are basically supply sources. For the British, they're going to have to be supplied through a controlled key space up here or through the seaboard locations back from the sea lanes. And they can also have magazines too that they can be supplied from, but we'll talk about those once we get to the deployment of magazines. So what do the British want to do? We still have Johnson up there with 2 loyalists and Oswego, it looks like. And Carleton sitting up here with a loyalist and a regular. I think these are just garrisons, which are special units we'll talk about also once we get involved with those sitting on magazines. And I think that was an entrenchment. So garrisons are like glass in this game, 1/4 strength point. And then Ticonderoga also has a garrison in it. So the British are looking weak along the Canadian border there. So one thing we could do is we have a regular sitting in Halifax, which is not threatened at the moment. So we could move him out. And maybe that's the smart thing to do. Yeah, let's go ahead and try to move this. And again, you have to say your destination before you do it. So let's go ahead and move. We're going to try to move that British regular is going to try to move to Quebec. So this is a move without a leader, no leader there. So when you do that, you simply roll a D6 and you get a -2 to the roll. Whatever you get is how far you can move. And you always get to move at least 1, even if you roll a 1 or a 2 in this case, you still get to move 1. So let's go ahead and roll for his movement. This case, he rolls a 3, -2 is 1. So he's only gonna be able to move 1. And our destination, I said, was Quebec. So he's going to have to come up along to the St. Lawrence and he'll have to stop there because he only rolled a 1 with the modifier. So that ends the first action pulse for the British. Let's zoom in quick so I can show you this. So the British took their action pulse. So it went from 2 to 1. Now the colonials take their action pulse. So this will go down from 2 to 1. And we will see what the colonials want to do. Let's zoom back out. So what do the colonials want to do here? We have a militia unit down in Newport. Benedict Arnold is sitting here in New Haven with 1 militia. There's a garrison here which cannot move. Garrisons have to stay put. And there's that 6 militia sitting in Worcester there. Oh, and Ethan Allen is sitting up here. What has he got? Ethan Allen is leading 2 militia. And we also have some units in these. We can't forget about our southern units. We also have these 2 militia sitting in Richmond, and Dunmore has 2 loyalists in Norfolk. I don't think we want to launch any kind of campaign against Norfolk right now. We do eventually, maybe. I think the best bet's going to be have Allen move on Fort Ticonderoga because that's a valuable fort to have. Now the question is, do we want him to march on that fort with his 2 strength points, or do we want to try to reinforce him with something else? We could peel off some of these militia units and have them rendezvous with Allen, then attack Ticonderoga. Yes, let's have Allen attack Ticonderoga. So we have our 1 action point, our action pulse. We've moved our marker down. So Allen has a 5 for his initiative value. So we've got to roll for activation here. This is going to be called movement with a leader. And you're right, I should probably put down this to show his destination, this Ticonderoga. So we're going to roll for his activation. Let's do that. So that means he's a 5. You're looking for 5 or less to activate the unit. Rolls a 4, so he's activated. So 4 gives him his 4 movement points. In this case, he rolled a 4. But when you move with a leader, you get 4 movement points. Whether you roll 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, you're going to get 4 movement points. If he had rolled a 6 higher than his initiative, then he would only get 2 movement points. You still get to move, but you would get 2 movement points. So in this case, he gets his full 4. So looking at the map here, it's hard to see, but there is a dashed line going to Ticonderoga. That is a trail, I believe it's called. The Wilderness Trails, those are 2 movement points each. Unless you're a Native American unit, it's only 1 movement point. So it's going to be 2 movement points to Ticonderoga, and of course he has 4, so that's plenty. So Ethan Allen will move to Ticonderoga. Now, because Ticonderoga is a control space, and that is determined by these little keys. If it has a key in it, it's a control space. So because it's a control space, once he reaches Ticonderoga, he does not have to attack. He could just say, well, I'm just going to sit here and see what's going on inside there to see how the British react. And so he could just sit there, doesn't have to attack, but he is going to attack. Now, because that's a garrison in there, if it weren't a garrison, if it were a regular, it could try to retreat before combat, but it's a garrison, so it can't. So there's got to be a battle there. And so let me zoom in so we can take a close look at our first battle. All right, let's go ahead and spread these out so we can see. There's only 1 unit under there, really. So just Ethan Allen, the 2 strength point militia against the guard. So he's going to attack, and there's going to be some modifiers to this attack. So if we look at our combat chart, I can get this on here. Here's our battle modifiers. So there's leader value, and that's the D for Allen. So unfortunately for Allen, D is a 0 to the modifier. So D would be a 0, C is +1, B is +2, and A is +3. So nothing for his leader value there. He is, and there's another thing I'm going to point out here. So he has 2 strength point militia going after a quarter strength point garrison. So if you look at your chart in this battle, if that's 8-to-1 odds, well, that's an overrun if retreat before combat fails. Well, garrisons cannot retreat. So normally this would be an overrun. What stops this from being an overrun is the fact that Ticonderoga is a fort. And when units are in a fort, they cannot be overrun. So, but that will give Ethan Allen greater than, we'll give him 4-to-1 odds or greater. So he's going to get a +3 for that. So he's going to get a +3 for those odds. And that's great until you keep reading and you see that if you're attacking a fortress, you get a -3. So that's a wash. He's not going to get anything for that. And if you look at the other modifiers here, nothing else here is going to apply to Ethan Allen's attack here. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll 2d6 for each side, and the garrison is less than 1. He's going to be rolling on this table. And then Ethan Allen has 2 straight points. He'll be rolling on this table with no modifiers. So let's see if I can get the dice tower in the shot. And we'll just bring this in. It's going to be hard to do with all these zoomed in. Let's see. Maybe we can see it here. Oh, I'm going to make sure I don't run over any other units. I'll try it like that. So I'm going to grab 2 red D6s and 2 blue D6s. And we will roll these and see what they get. Our first battle, the Colonials roll low. They get a 3. And the British roll a 9. You want to roll high in this game. That was bad. And just a quick note here. On the bottom where it says forts, maximum 2 strength points are doubled. Again, this is nebulous, but basically if you read the rules, what that means is if you have a 1 or 2 strength point unit in a fort, that it can be doubled. However, garrisons cannot be doubled. So just in case you saw that and were wondering. So anyway, this was a bad result for the Continentals because the British rolled a 9. So if you look on that -1 table, a 9 is 2 stars. And then Allen rolled a 3 on the 2 column. A 3 is a no result. So they actually valiantly repulsed the loyalists there under, or the militia rather, under Ethan Allen. So we will go ahead and zoom back out now. Let's get these dice off the board. So Allen's going to have to retreat, and he's going to earn a D marker. So let's grab that. So we've got our D marker, and we will put that on top of Allen. Now that D marker denotes that if he has to retreat again, he's going to lose a strength point. He has to go back to the space he came from, which was Norwich here. And the garrison just sits there in Ticonderoga. So an embarrassing defeat for Allen there. Maybe he should have played the battle card. Probably would have been a good idea. We also have some tactical commanders. We have a tactical commander that we could have played that. I think it's a little too early for that, though, but basically that would have to attach to 1 strength point a unit, and it would add a +1 to that strength point. But I don't think we're ready to do that quite yet. All right, so both sides have completed 1 action pulse. Remember, they started with 2. They're both down to 1. That completes an action round. So now they have 1 more action round to go through. Each will conduct 1 more action pulse. But this time, though, we're going to have to roll for initiative. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll grab a D6 for each side. The higher number wins. If there's a tie, then there will be some special rules around ties, and I'll show you those when a tie occurs. But for now, let's roll. And the British roll a 5, the Colonials roll a 1. So the British will have the initiative again. They had it last turn, or last action round, I should say. Now that's important for the British, especially since the Colonials have a unit with a D marker on it, because that D marker comes off at the beginning of the next Colonial action pulse. In this case, though, I don't think it's going to do the British any good, but we'll see. So I'm going to see, you can't see it, but I'm going to move the British action pulse marker now goes to 0. And the Colonials are still at 1 because they'll still get to go. All right, so the first thing we got to do, we still have this unit that we had making its way towards Quebec. So basically there you're going to roll a D6 and move them again. This will not consume the action pulse for the British. But you just roll. He gets a 3, so that's more than enough to get to Quebec. So let's go ahead and get him on into Quebec. That's just 1 to get in there. So that was 1. And now there's 2 strength points of British regulars in Quebec. And Carleton is there. So we'll move that unit. And we still have the action pulse to spin here for the British. So I think the British are eyeing Rhode Island here because it's only 1 key space in Rhode Island. And if you lose a colony, then the political will change in favor of the British if they take Rhode Island. There's only 1 militia unit there, so I think they might try to move on Rhode Island. So let's see what the British have. We saw this fleet here, but let's see who we want to send down there. I'll spread these out. So we have 6 strength points worth of British regulars and 1 militia unit for the British. And remember that you must always have 4 strength points worth of regulars in Boston. Now, the rule book tells you there's some other cities where there are some minimum requirements and strength points for maintaining control of the space. So here they got to keep 6. So I'm going to make change again. We'll take this 6 counter and get a 4 and a 2. We'll send 2 units down to Rhode Island. So there's our 6. I'm going to put the Loyalists will stay behind. And who do we want to send down to? I'm going to send Howe because he's an A leader. We'll just put these all back in here. I'm going to attempt, rather, I should say, to send Howe, and 2 regulars are going to attempt to go to Rhode Island there. So what we're going to do is roll for his initiative. I'm pretty sure he's going to make it. He is, what is he? He's a 4, so we roll our D6. Well, he didn't get his initiative, but remember, he's a leader moving, so he still gets 2 movement points. And it's only 1 to Newport. So, not even sure I had to roll there, but we did. So he's going to march down here to Newport, Rhode Island. So now this is a militia unit, not a garrison, so it can actually retreat before combat. So this militia unit is going to try to retreat. He's kind of silly not to. He can retreat 1 space if he is successful. And remember again, that little black dot in the corner there means he will convert to a continental here pretty soon. I'm going to try to get him out of there. He's going to try to retreat. Now to retreat, he's going to have to roll a 1 or a 2 to be successful. Otherwise, he's going to be attacked. So we grab a blue D6 and he rolls for retreat. And of course he rolls a 6, so he's not going anywhere. All right, so let's go ahead and add up our modifiers here. So we have Hal he's an A-class leader. So looking at our battle modifiers, that is going to give it just says leader value. Something I wish they had put on the chart here is what those leader values are. They had room. They should have put the A, B, C, D and what that adds. They didn't, but there you go. So he's an A, so that's a +3 for being an A. The other thing is they're at 2-to-1 odds, so that's going to give them a +1. So now they're at +4. Then the other thing here is whenever you have regulars versus militia, you get a +1 to the attacker and a -1 to the defender. So it's going to end up being the British will get a +5 to whatever they roll. The militia will get a -1 to whatever they roll. So it doesn't look too good for these poor little militia units. But let's go ahead and roll for them and see what we get. Remember, you always roll 2d6 in battle for each side. That is a 7 plus, I said 5, so that's 12 for the British. And it's actually an 8 or a 9, so it's an 8 for the colonials. So looking at our battle chart here, it's the British were going in with 2. They rolled 12, so it's a 1 loss on the militia, so it is gone. The militia rolled 7 with a modifier, and a 7 is just 2 stars. So the British have won. They've eliminated a militia unit. So that comes off the board. Get the dice out of the way. And then Hal marches in to Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island, with his 2 militia units. So Rhode Island happens to be a colony, one of the 13 colonies. So when you lose a colony in this game, that affects the political will chart. The political will for the colonials will go down 1. So I'm going to move that down from 13 to 12. And because they captured a colony, the political will for the British goes from 2 to 3. So that was important for the British because that caused a political will change for both sides. So that is going to end the British action pulse. The colonials have 1 action pulse remaining. I'm going to move that down from 1 to 0. So this is the last action pulse that will be conducted in the spring of 1775. What do the colonials want to do here? First thing that's going to happen, since there is a new action pulse, is this marker comes off of Allen, so that goes away. But what do they want to do? We still have Allen. He could try another assault on Ticonderoga. Had a really bad dice roll there. That may not happen again, but who knows? You have Arnold sitting down here with 1 little militia unit. He could come back and try to knock the garrison out of New York. Might not be a bad idea. We saw the 6 militia sitting outside of Boston. I don't think I want to move those just yet, though. And then we have some units down here in Virginia. And there's even, can you see the ones in South Carolina down here? Move this up a little bit. So there's a militia unit here in Charleston with a fort. So there's a fortress there, and there's a loyalist unit up there in 96. That is a British control space there, key space. So I think since the British didn't reinforce Ticonderoga, I think Allen's going to try to move on it again. So again, he's at a 5. We'll roll for his initiative. He rolls. Again, he rolls a 4, so he's good. It's 2 movement points to Ticonderoga again. It's the same setup we had last time. No change. The modifiers will be the same, which were no modification because there's -3 for it being a fort, but he gets +3 because the odds are in his favor. They're greater than 4 to 1. So let's get the dice tower back out real quick. This should be a quick battle. Again, we roll the dice to see if Allen can take Ticonderoga. And still not very good dice rolling there. So there's a 5 for the colonials and a 6 for the British. So what does that mean? So the colonials rolled a 5. So they were at 2 on the 2 columns. So they get 2 stars. The the garrison, I'm trying to say, they rolled a 6. So that little garrison rolls a 6. No result. So actually, this results in a victory for Allen because he did get 2 stars. So garrisons cannot retreat. It's simply eliminated. It is destroyed. So we'll pull that out of Ticonderoga. All right. And so Allen marches into Ticonderoga with 2 militia. So that's not bad. He's got 2 strength points in a fort. So that's actually pretty powerful position for Alan to be in after that embarrassing defeat. And that's going to conclude the action pulse for the Colonials. So I think what I'm going to do is stop it here. We went through one complete action cycle for 1775, the spring. So when we come back, we're going to go into early summer of 1775. And we will have the potential for having 4 action pulses there. That could be shorter. If you roll a tie when you're rolling for initiative, it can mess up your action pulses. You immediately just have 1 action pulse remaining. But like I said, when we have our first tie, I will talk you through that. So I do want to end it here. That we are approaching, at least in the States here, Thanksgiving is coming up, the holidays. So it may be a bit before I can get back to this. I will get back to it, though, before we see the early summer turn for the... So I'm not sure when exactly I'll get back to this. Hopefully pretty soon, because I'm enjoying this. So if you've noticed anything that I've done wrong, let me know in the comments below. Like I said, leave a rule number if at all possible. I think I did everything right. It's just going to get more complicated as we go along. But again, I think once you learn these rules, this will be a very fast playing game. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you have not. There's a Patreon page up if you want to become a patron to My Own Worst Enemy. That always helps the channel. That's probably the best way to support the channel and keeps me doing these videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here next time.